But it is great to see so many of you here to discuss still reeling race identity and the 2016 election. It is my, what's this, Teach LGBT.
So we're part of, Ravi and I have channels in an edited volume, and this is the hashtag for it, and so this would be great PR if you do tweet anything, to use these two, please.
Well, I'm going to just do
Please tweet away.
Khaki school, so just to make sure it's okay. If the lucky one, you look into the courses that are offered by Professor Murib. Courses such as
Gender and Sexuality in U.S. Politics next semester, and American Social Movements.
Ooh, can I take them?
Yeah. And so then also we have Professor Ravi Perry, who was my co-chair for the National Conference of Black Political Scientists. We just finished putting together a conference in San Diego. Those of you who are in my classes know that I've been exhausted by that whole year-long process. This was my partner in crime, which is great. And the deans so generously provided us with an opportunity to bring Professor Perry here. He focuses on Black politics, urban politics, and LGBTQ politics. So I just wanted to have a discussion with two people that I think are brilliant and leave plenty of time for us to sort of ask them anything they might sort of specialize in about the election, about moving forward. I know for some of you, there's a bit of anxiety for various communities that you may be a part of. And so we've got scholars here, and so why not take advantage of it on a beautiful, what day is this? Thursday. Semester. It's like, okay. So without further, and I'm Professor Greer, for those of you who don't know who I am. I teach in the political science department. I'm the associate chair, so if you want to join the department, you need my John Hancock. If you don't get your things in on time and you want to graduate, you definitely need my John Hancock. That means my signature, for those of you who have taken my intro classes. And I teach basically all the standard American politics classes: presidency, Congress, parties and elections, intro, race and ethnicity, and urban politics, along with a few others. Okay, so to my fellow dance troupe. So I wanted to start, I feel like in my classes we're still talking about the election, and this is not something, even when Barack Obama was elected, it happened, lots of fanfare and fervor, but then we sort of got back to business and we were talking about local, state, national politics, but it wasn't really the fact that Barack Obama was on our sort of the forefront of our minds every day. This particular election in 2016 feels very different in the sense that it seems as though the president comes up on a daily basis, largely because some of the things that we talk about pertaining to the president in the morning aren't necessarily what we talk about at lunchtime, and they're not really what we're concerned about at dinner, and it's definitely not what we're thinking about before we go to sleep. So with this particular election, sort of how do we get here, right? Can you all sort of give us some thoughts on like some voters maybe who voted sincerely versus strategically, and just kind of lay out the groundwork just a little bit for what you think possibly went on in 2016 and kind of move us to this briefly in your analysis, right? Because the book hasn't been written yet as to what happened. So Ravi, let's start with you.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Well, you're our guest, so.
So for a more elongated version of what I'm about to say, I actually have an interview right now on New Haven Independent. That's at 7 o'clock tonight. If you are bored and looking for something to listen to, you can go to newhavenindependent.org. I did a whole interview yesterday for an hour talking about my thoughts on this, and so I'll say don't have an hour by myself now, but if you want more longer versions of the nuances and the complications and details of this last election as it relates to what my current opinions are, then you can go there at 7 and check that out. It's free online internet radio streaming based on New Haven. Long story short, 2016 election obviously began in like 2012. And we were really seeing dozens of potential candidates. We got down to about 16, 17 Republicans, 3 or 4 Democrats. Really, everyone knew, even at that stage, that Hillary Clinton was going to run. We knew that she was going to be she was the presumptive nominee, and lo and behold, that is in fact what happened. But because we knew all of that, we had a very serious protest movement within the liberal corners of our American politics, where for years leading up to that presumptive nominee crowning of Hillary Clinton, you had people who were doing all that they could to ensure that her record would be, in their minds, seriously interrogated. And the reality is they were successful. That actually is what happened. My personal opinion is that the tonality of what happened and some of the context of what happened and some of the timing of what happened and some of the outlets in which it happened and some of the voices that were arguing anti-Clinton messages is really what created the problem that we have today, and that is Donald Trump as our 45th president. And let's be clear, that is a problem. And it's a problem for those of us who care about marginalized communities. It's a problem for those of us who care about the poor. It's a problem for those of us who care about immigrants and those who are attempting to gain citizenship status in this country. It's a problem for all of us. And so that's essentially what happened on the Democratic side. On the Republican side, every establishment Republican that you thought was going to win did not, could not even break any type of somewhat close relationship with how successful Trump was doing, in part because he was getting billions of dollars of free advertising from our American corporate media. And they loved him because he brought in revenue. And at the end of the day, you've got to pay the bills. And so that's essentially why Donald Trump got such free revenue, because people were excited or so annoyed that either way they watched. And so that is what got him to where he is. And fast forward to the general election, really the September, kind of post-convention, October, September through November season. Two quick problems. You had the African-American kind of liberal community circles, who many of whom were really against Hillary Clinton because of her super predator comments in the 90s. A lot of black scholars took to the airwaves and their social media networks and to national news networks to try to express their views of why not Hillary, why not now. And the result has been that they were largely successful. And so today, what we still have now is a huge left-wing, left-of-center ideological disagreement between people who fall on that side of the ideological spectrum. And if we do not solve that disagreement between now and November 2018, all the issues that we care about collectively, because we actually all agree on the end game in terms of universal freedom for a variety of groups, we disagree on the way to get there. And if we don't actually solve that problem and find some ways so we can agree on the strategy, then we will see Donald Trump reelected, and that will be disastrous for everybody. Is that short enough? Sorry.
No, and I'll dig through once I hear from Zein.
So the question is, how did we get here? And I think, I think that everything that you say is absolutely right on point, obviously. And I think the one thing that I would add is that this call that you ended on to sort things out in the party on the left is really important, because I think, we were all sitting back and laughing, and we thought that the Republican Party was going through a period of dramatic realignment, and what we didn't realize is that actually I think the Democrats were going through a period of chaos and realignment that we do have to get straightened up. And so I think, I appreciate the way that this conversation is framed in terms of still reeling and what do we do moving forward, and I hope we'll get a chance to talk more about that too.
Right. Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So because the thing is, it's not that the Democrats were, I think the Democrats still are.
Yeah.
Right? Going through
Absolutely.
this kind of moment of uncertainty and full on, I think, two warring factions in the party. And so let's talk about Democratic voters and Republican voters in 2016. And so I wanted you all to sort of tease through this strategic versus sincere, right? Because we do know that, yes, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump were the two major party candidates, but you still had Jill Stein and Gary Johnson, who totaled together made up 5% of the electorate. And so what role do you feel they played? I'll get to Bernie in a second. But yeah, turn it on this man. Now he's not a Democrat.
Wait, were you surprised by that?
No, but it's like, hey, if you're not a Democrat, what do Democratic primary. Come on in. So here we are. We'll get to him later, maybe during Q&A. He's on my list. But trust and believe you don't want to be on that list. But let's talk about Stein and Johnson, right? I mean, they made up 5%. They clearly resonated to some degree with voters. Voters who either strategically wanted to send a message to either the Democratic or Republican Party, or they sincerely believed in the message that Johnson and Stein were putting out. So, I mean, can you two talk a little bit more about the role that you think that they played, not just for the Democrats, but for the Republicans as well? And, I mean, and also, can you touch upon young people, because it seemed like, hello, Professor Bryant. It really did seem like those two candidates in particular resonated with young people as well. And so I guess the final part of my question will be, are young people to blame for everything, right? If they went with Stein and Johnson and et cetera.
Yeah.
Pressure.
This is such an important question, because if we think about, what we perceive to be the realignment that's happening in both of the major parties, you are going to have disaffected voters, right? And so this enter the third party candidates, and Professor Greer has this great piece about how we underestimate the role that third party candidates play, right?
Tell me more about this.
But and so I think that this is an excellent question, and I would kind of kick it back to you and ask what you think about this and ways that they're pulling, because we know that this happens in primaries, right? We know that third party Bernie is pulling Hillary to the left, and maybe Ted Cruz is pulling everyone to the right as far as he can get them. But in terms of the general election, I wonder about the lasting effect, and if the parties are seeing the writing on the wall with this 5% of votes, and if they're saying like, okay, well, we see that we saw what happened with Bernie, we see this 5%. I don't know. It's helping to reframe how they're thinking about things.
Do you want to take it, or you want to?
No, I'll take it brief. I'll try to be brief. We're all to blame. And seriously, we have to take real responsibility for that. What we all do in social justice circles, we always, when we talk about difficult things and diversity and inclusion and bringing people together, it all requires us to do debriefing afterward. We did not do that in this election, and we need to be doing that, and these types of panels are some of the ways in which we can actually do that debriefing, which is why I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm really grateful that we can have this discussion. But the reality is we are all to blame. If you are someone who is a college student here at Fordham in New York City, but you come from Virginia, where I am, and you decided to not vote in your home state of Virginia, but in New York, you made a bad decision. And you need to own up to that, if that's what happened, right? Because you should have voted in Virginia, where votes, particularly on the left, are needed in order to ensure that states, bellwether states like Virginia, Ohio, Florida, actually go the way that some of us would like those states to go in these important years. So we have to do a real inventory about our participation. Also, check to see when you actually first got involved in the election in 2016. Did you show up in August? Did you show up on October 25th? Did you show up on November 8th? Did you show up 3 years earlier? And if you're someone who did that late, then I would ask you to do it earlier and earlier and earlier next time around, particularly if you're someone who claims to have been a third-party candidate supporter. If you were, in my opinion, and this is a pejorative, I'm going to put it that way, but if you were duped by the third-party arguments based on rhetoric and wonderful rallies and all the amazing things we wanted to hear, and you never actually stopped and checked the records of the individuals telling you those things, you are gullible. You fell for it. You might have believed in what was being said, as me and several of my friends and colleagues did. But some of us had the fortitude to actually step back from what we hear and what we see and actually check the record for ourselves. And a lot of us did not do that, and so we fell for Jill Stein and Gary Johnson and Bernie Sanders in ways that we really should not have, because if you actually stop and look at any of their records and what they've done for the communities that you claim to care about, not what they say now, but what they've done in the past, then I think we would have actually been able to see something different in terms of our interaction. This is a young person, I think, concern, because young people do live in a 140-character world. We do live in a world where we look at pictures and Instagram and all those things, and I can tell this on Facebook now, since I'm being Facebook Live. Whenever I put up a photo on Facebook, it gets all types of immediate responses, right? If you put up text that requires people to read 3 lines, it gets a substantially lower number of responses. Why? Because we have been conditioned over the years to be responsive to what we see and what we hear. And in politics, we have to be a little bit more judicious, to go a little bit further, to ensure that we are doing, and I'll shut up here, that we are voting the interests of the groups that we care about, not our individual ideological preferences. That's hard. That's uncomfortable sometimes, but if you claim to care about black people, you claim to care about queer people, you claim to care about poor people, you claim to care about the other, broadly speaking, then you should be voting those decisions that's going to best help those groups now. Not 30 years down the line, not 50 years down the line, not in some unknown future where third parties might run the world. Now, because what we have when we don't do that is the result of what we got now running the White House, and that is really, this is a perfect example of one step forward with Obama, and now we've gone back 50,000 steps. And those are lessons we learned from somebody's mama and grandmama or babysitter years ago, and we did not remember that lesson last November.
So, I'm going to trademark this. We haven't asked me to trademark it. Read before retweeting. Right? I find that I post things and 2 minutes later it's retweeted. I'm like, did you have time to really read that 10-page article? 30 seconds. I just put it up there. But it's you're sharing it, but it could be bonkers, right? And I've fallen prey to that, especially when I first joined the Twitter, right? Where it's oh, this looks interesting. I'll read it later, but I want other people to read it. And then you go through it, it's this article actually is not saying what the title said, and it's actually not really that good, and I actually shouldn't be putting it out there, right? Yeah. So I'm trademarking this, read before retweet. It's not already. But I think I do want to go back to this point of the third-party candidates, and then push back a little bit on some local, state, national conversations, right? So we know the significance of Perot in '92. Obviously, my intro students know the significance of Perot in '92. And he's part of the reason why George H.W. Bush got sent back to Texas, right? And we know the role of Nader in 2000. Besides Al Gore being a terrible candidate, and also
he lost his own state.
Well, I mean, listen, people. I say this all the time. If you run for an office, win your own state. That's one. And 2, let's also be clear. I'm very close to my sister. If I were running for president, she just happened to be the governor of Florida, I think that so we don't have an awkward Christmas. You're gonna have to deliver Florida, right? They had a few awkward Christmases because it's he delivered it, but it wasn't a clean delivery, right? So we know there were a lot of moving parts in 2000, but Nader got 5% of the vote, and that actually, besides Al Gore not doing his job and George Bush having some additional assistance from his family, right? We saw some hiccups. So I want us to remember that this 5% matters, right? I mean, in some ways, these independents that we chase every 4 years, who are just I don't know, and it's here we are, just sweating you again. But we get it, right? There are no parties mentioned in the Constitution. George Washington warned us about the party system in his farewell address, right? And he really knew that it was going to turn into this football match, red state, blue state, red, blue, the teams, right? And so we're really struggling with that. But I did want to push back on something you said, Ravi, which was, if you're in New York and you're from Virginia, or now Wisconsin,
right? Yeah, right.
What did I say? Wisconsin, right? Or Michigan, right? Or Ohio, which you know about, or Pennsylvania. Where's Kayla? Is she here? Here we go. Whoop, whoop. Kuntstown, or whatever, Kuntsville, or whatever. Kuntsville, sorry. I was yeah, exactly. Right? So here's the thing. So, Kayla, did you vote in New York or Pennsylvania? Pennsylvania. So, Kayla.
Yay!
I mean, yeah. So, but here's the thing. So, Robbie's kudos to Kayla, she did the right thing. And part of me does think, Kayla, now I'm going to pick on you. Part of me does feel like Kayla did the right thing, voting in Kunkelstown. Oh, no, there's no S, Kunkelstown, right? But my issue is, I feel like we aren't paying close enough attention to local and state politics, right? So even in a state like New York, which is very red, I argue that all states are red states. Just little blue pockets that turn them red or blue every 4 years, right? New York, there are parts of New York I wouldn't go to at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, let alone 10 o'clock at night, right? I mean, as Malcolm border is the U.S. South. So we have to remember that.
Come on, Malcolm.
Right? Come on. 10 years straight. I'm just pointing them out.
Yes.
Right? But here's the thing. So under Obama, right? So we've got Obama. Democrats take an 8-year victory lap, patting themselves on the back. They nominated and elected this black man, Barack Hussein Obama. If Kayla knows that she's going to stay in New York at least for 4 years or more, right? And we want to make sure that Albany gets itself righted. I mean, we've got some wild things going on, not just with fracking and environmental issues. We've got LGBTQ issues. We've got women's right to choose issues. We've got marriage issues. We've got some serious financial issues, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on. These state houses have been, Republicans have been working on these state houses for a good 20 plus years. I mean, solidly working on it. And Democrats took an 8-year hiatus where they didn't think about local and state politics really, because it's like, well, cities, for now, people of color live in cities, so you don't really have to worry about that. You usually get a big D Democrat mayor, but like everything else has kind of been going right. So the Democrats right now, they don't control the presidency, they don't control the House or the Senate, or the governorships, or any of the state houses. I mean, Republicans have 33 of the state houses, and they just need one more, and they can call it a whole constitutional convention, right? So it's real on the state level that Democrats haven't done their due diligence and Republicans are in control. Now, is it that their message is resonating with people? Is it that they know how to turn people out more so than Democrats? Right? I mean, there are a whole host of questions, but I would then ask you, in the Kayla scenario, should she be voting here in New York or wherever she ends up to make sure that the local and state politics are taken care of?
So I see I've been scammed because you get to do the fun part of asking all the great questions. And we have the hard job of trying to answer these. Yes, actually, yes. Because at least in states like Virginia, partly because of racism.
Yes, what? Sorry.
So yes, you should vote. You should do both. And I'll explain how.
Hey, wait, we're not Trump, so they vote in state.
Well, here's how you can.
Okay.
Because in a lot of states, because of racism, etc., they made local and state elections off year. So, in Virginia, for example, we're voting in November, this coming November, for governor for a lot of our local and state races.
And we're voting for a mayor and
right,
state houses
exactly. So you could be registered there now, and then 3 years later, change to another. People do that. It's legal. It's inconvenient. It's inconvenient because you can't do it in both places. That's what makes it illegal. It's voting, 2 elections at the same time. But people move every 2 or 3 years. I mean, so from the Board of Elections point of view, at every county level, you could actually, if you live in a state where their off-year elections are not during general elections, you could vote in general elections in one state, and then 3-4 years later, switch your absentee balloting to vote the other state. Because you are a legal resident of New York, if you choose to be, as a student here. And you also still have your status, particularly if you're still getting, for example, health insurance under your parents' plan, and they're based in another state, you still have your legal residency status there. And so it's possible to do both. The easy side of that is, that's the easier answer. The harder answer is, I wouldn't blame the Democratic Party and the Obama administration for not leading the local and state effort. I would blame the party.
The DNC?
The DNC and the party in general. The party chose to screw state and local parties. And so if you work in the county or state level, you can call any state or county level Democratic Party chair, and they will tell you they've lost money, they've gotten fewer dollars from the DNC over the last 10, 15 years because the money has gone to national elections. And so that is a party problem, and it's a party problem in part because of what Dr. Greer was saying, that we've got to have attention on local, state, and national issues, but it's very hard to do so. But it is possible for you to vote local and state and nationally, and you have to just be very strategic in doing so, given the locales in which you are associated with your parents or your place of birth or where you are in college currently. Because you're absolutely right. New York, California are as mapped as blue states, but let's be very clear. There are large portions of New York and California and other places that are not blue, have never been blue, are never going to be blue. Those states are Massachusetts, they're written off as these, in national conversation, as these blue states, and
they are absolutely not.
And they really are not if you've ever lived there. So we do have to be diligent about that, but the point is you can be both active, generally, national elections and local and state. You should be active in all three.
Can I say something provocative and suggest that perhaps we are hoping for too much in electoral politics? So one of the things that I think we're not talking about is the role that gerrymandering plays. And so yes, absolutely, like the party is not giving money to state and local politics, but 10 years ago the Republicans gained control on these partisan redistricting commissions, and they drew the lines in districts to make it so that they were going to win all the time. So you have a state like Wisconsin, right, that has a very strong... Wisconsin. I was in Minnesota and I've lived in Wisconsin, so we could just call it like cheese curd. With all due respect to cheese curds. But the idea that I was building towards is that you live in these places and you actually know that they are in fact blue for the most part in people's hearts, but redistricting has made it, and I think that there has been a lot of different ways that I want to check myself here because I want to say that redistricting has packed red voters. They've given them a disproportionate influence. So if it is in fact the case that gerrymandering and the party isn't giving money and all of these things help to explain the lack of control in state and local politics, then what do we do? Well, one is we try to get nonpartisan districting, and I think that's what Obama has turned his attention to now, if I understand correctly. But then the other thing is I would put a strong plug in for representation in other forums. So I teach a class on social movements and I teach a class on interest groups, and the idea here is that we need to be getting young people like you voting in all the different places that you can vote, but then also politically engaged in really important and meaningful ways on the ground. And I think that what we mean by on the ground is changing so much. On the ground means online too, and talking to your friends and getting people to mobilize in ways that are significant and impactful outside of electoral politics.
So that's a great segue to my next question, because I wanted to know, essentially, transitioning into action steps before we open it up for Q&A, but so what should people be doing beyond, say, protest and Facebook? So I bring that up largely because in my urban politics class, who hears from urban politics this semester? So, urban politics. We had a commissioner come and talk to us, and he gave an example of when he worked for the governor. They were on the 50th floor, and there was a huge protest downstairs against the governor, right, on the street. Hundreds of people shouting. Well, they're on the 50th floor. They're going about their business, right? He comes down, he sees that there's a protest about them, the governor's office, etc. And when he went back up to the 50th floor and he looked out the window, it literally looks like they're just yelling at the sky, right? Because they're yelling at the building where the governor is, but the governor's, not even in the building, right? And so sort of thinking about these protests this weekend about taxes, and that happened in all these different cities, and the president's golfing, and it's like, okay, so who is this for, and what is it for? So thinking about sort of these protest movements, and also, Facebook politicking, again, I'm not on Facebook, right? But I've been told that people love the Facebook and these conversations that happen, right? So moving beyond voting, we also need to give people someone to vote for, right? I think part of our turnout problem is that, especially when we think about young people, they're not really excited about people because it's like, I think what this particular administration has shown us is just how old and male and white so many of these candidates are. And it's like, the Muppet guys that sit in the balcony, and that turns a lot of people off, and so there's representation that's not really there. Young people aren't necessarily encouraged to run for office because it's really expensive and they think they can't, sort of make an entree in unless they have a certain last name or, they became hedge fund managers at 22, and there we are. And then this kind of participation that goes not just with sort of activist politics, but also this kind of online community. So what should young people be doing then? Like, you know, I mean, I think that protest and electoral politics need to go hand in hand for us to move forward in any agenda, right? And I think the Republicans actually, looking at the Tea Party, like actually did a really good job of electoral politics and protest politics to motivate people in and out of office. But like, for this moment in time, in 2017, for people who were still reeling about the election, what should they be doing? Because some of these protests literally feel like they're just yelling at the sky with pink hats on. No disrespect to the women's movement, but you all know I did my job. I did my job with black women. So, like, now I'm supposed to be in the cold marching. I told you what to do, but now I'm supposed to go march every weekend. I'm not doing that. So that's also another conversation about intersectional politics. It's like, well, there's certain segments of women who are just like, yeah, I did what I was supposed to do for the last 18 months. So,
you have to believe, first of all, in electoral politics. If you are part of the leftist wing of the ideological spectrum that thinks that the entire two-party system's a fuck up and you gotta start from scratch and redo everything, then for me, you are part of the problem. The system has never been designed to be perfect. It's designed to be participatory. And so you actually are helping the system not work if you're not participating in it. So you got to believe in electoral politics, first of all. That doesn't mean you have to like the system. Doesn't mean you have to agree with how it functions. Just like how we might not like a lot of things about school, but you still go through it so you can finally finish and move on to life, right? You know, so this is the reality. We might not like anything about the political system, but it's designed for you to participate. And we have seen for hundreds of years that when the marginalized as a group does participate, we win. And we benefit from that victory. And so you have to first believe that you can actually win some major victories for the issues you care about in electoral politics. That's an actual belief. And some of us who have been fortunate of taking political science classes have to really, I think, be very serious with our colleagues and our friends who are also on that street line, also at that protest yelling at the governor, who have never taken a politics class. And as a result, many of them understand politics, but not in a very detailed way as a political science student or major, or just someone who's taken an intro to American politics might. Even experts, friends of ours who are experts in other fields, but have been tapped into the political conversation, the media world, really in ways that they should not have accepted because they are not experts on politics. Politics is the actual real thing. It's something you can actually get degrees in. You can actually study it. And so we have to actually study politics to figure out how protests and politics and organizing and politics has worked well in the past together. That's the whole purpose of reading. And so that you can read to see what worked well and what did not work well. There have been people who have been anti-two-party system, particularly African Americans. We can document back to the 1700s. That's nothing new. It's not a new concept. So you actually aren't bringing anything new to the conversation, and that's kind of like your linchpin. What we should be doing is figuring out ways to work within the system to make it better be responsive to the interests that you care about. And we can only do that if we're both in the street, but also in the policy boardrooms and also in the electoral scene as well.
Well, they say what, if you're not on the table, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu?
Exactly. Yes.
Any thoughts on that? Or just, in the previous question?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the reason, I think that what we see with the 2016 election, which I think is really important to take note of, is that it wasn't the voters themselves prevailing, but anti-democratic institutions prevailing. So superdelegates in the Democratic Party account for Hillary Clinton prevailing over Bernie Sanders, and then we also have the Donald Trump even though Hillary Clinton gets the the popular vote. And so I think that the partnership or the interaction, the dynamic that we need to aim for with respect to protests and electoral politics is that there are enough people in the streets. Like, it has to be undeniable that there is enough people who are pushing politics where they need to be so that there can be some responsiveness. And we see, I mean, you mentioned Malcolm X earlier. I mean, we see this with Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. Like, they knew what each other were doing. They were coordinating, right? And, they were saying you can either deal with me or you can deal with him, and you can figure out like what's going to happen, right? And so this push and pull, I think, is yeah, but do something. Right. And so sure enough, we get the Voting Rights Act, and we get these different things that are addressing formal segregation in U.S. politics, but it doesn't happen without marches happening. It doesn't happen without Malcolm X saying, the ballot or the bullet. And I think we need to keep in mind that those tensions our attention is being drawn to, because we're living in a moment where anti-democratic institutions have prevailed. And so what are we going to do? We need to be in the streets, I think.
I mean, I guess, one of the frustrations I have with the Democratic Party right now is that, when you mentioned the Voting Rights Act, right, and the Civil Rights Act, and the Immigration Act, and the Housing Act, right, these are all acts that were done by Lyndon Baines Johnson. My favorite. Former big-time racist, but...
and the Democratic supermajority in Congress.
In Congress, right? But he could wrangle, no pun intended, but he knew how to get that Democratic Congress to behave in the way that he needed them to. Keep in mind, there's a lot of white Southern Democrats who are now what we would consider white Southern Republicans, right? And so he knew that he would possibly pass these policies, and he said, I might lose the South forever, right? The Democrats might lose the South forever, which is ultimately what happened. We get that. But I guess my frustration with Democrats is that they pretend that LBJ never happened. And so they never mention him. Obama never mentioned him. The DNC never mentions him. It's like all these things that he did for these marginalized groups, writ large, it's just he never gets the credit, and he's just almost like purposefully ignored by the party. And the frustration for me seems like the Democratic Party is always running away from the very people who are the base, the supporters, and the people that they purportedly want to support and uplift, right? And so part of this erasure of LBJ speaks to me a large reason why so many marginalized communities don't turn out, period, because it seems as though the Democratic Party is never following them. They're still chasing after coal blast.
I wouldn't blame the party though.
Okay.
I agree with you.
Now,
yes. But I also
like,
think activists on the left in particular also don't know they don't even know, many of them, I don't think who LBJ is or what he did. And I think that becomes part of the problem when we don't actually know our political history that was successful in the past, and then we don't champion it like a party. Then it's very hard to get people excited to do something. But one of the things the LBJ story tells well, and one of our colleagues has a new book on that, Ford Dow, University of Arkansas. Is that he was able to bring people together, as Dr. Greer was saying, and I think if we were a little bit more aware of his successes as a political motivator in Congress, but also if we remember that all the things that we benefit from today as marginalized people occurred because of him and his dealing and wheeling ability, but also because we did have a majority or supermajority of Democrats in power in Congress for 30, 40 plus years. That's how all this stuff got done. So when people are anti the Democratic Party, to me, it's baffling to me, particularly when they're leftists or liberals, when you're anti the one party that's active and able to get something done for you, albeit slow, albeit not enough, albeit not necessarily what we've always wanted in terms of the way it turned out. But that's the only party that you can say, at least other than Republicans and slavery, that you can say has actually done something for you and the issues you care about. And then turn around in 2016 and basically say, screw that party, to me is it shows really a misunderstanding of political history.
So then, before we open it up, I want to ask, because the great thing about teaching at Fordham is that we have real intellectual diversity, right? I mean, not everyone's a Democrat, not everyone's a Republican. I mean, we've got libertarians in here. There's no libertarian, shout out. There we go. And, you know, we've got Green Party activists, we've got people who just, you know, take political science classes and they just don't believe in politics per se. But, you know, like, this is the great thing about influencing the minds of America's youth, right? That's a quote from the hate mail that I received. So cool. Right. Influence the minds of America's youth. Yes, I do. I do that for a living.
Yes, that's right.
So let's try and tap into, because I mean, for us to move forward and push forward, you know, what I would argue is a big D Democratic agenda, leftist agenda. What's in the minds of Republicans or individuals who consistently vote for the Republican Party? Because clearly, whatever messaging is going out there is working on the local, state, and national level. Like, you can't ignore the wins. Like, these are hits, people, right? And I mean, they're consistent, like, especially on the statewide level, they've been consistent over the past few years, you know, even pre-Obama days. And I think, obviously, your gerrymandering analysis is spot on. But I think it's not just gerrymandering, right? It has to be a message. The chiefs are coming out of the seats to go vote, right? And like, yes, we've structured voting in weird ways, and New Yorkers voted 4 different times last year. We're going to vote 3 times this year. We're going to go back and vote about 3 times next year. It's voter fatigue. It's not voter apathy, right? I mean, it's confusing because when we voted in 2016, April was for the presidential primary, June was for the congressional primary, September was for the state house primaries, and then we rolled in November. It's like, oh, now it's time to vote. Like, here we are, right? It's like, but I voted 3 times already, right? Vote early and often, Chicago style. So that's illegal. Don't do that. But so what is going on with the Republican Party where they're clearly selling something that's working not just for their base, but it's working for people who might be torn or on the fence, confused, whatever. Their articulation of a reality, I'm not going to say reality, but a reality is resonating with people. And why do you all think? Is it because the country is just getting more brown? Is it because it's getting more queer? Like, what's going on where people are they're voting, and they're voting for what many would argue is a message not of inclusion, but of exclusion?
So I was at a conference recently, and they were talking about far-right populist movements in Europe, and how they are using a lot of coded language to talk about what is effectively xenophobia, Islamophobia, white supremacy, anti-gay, anti-woman attitudes. And instead of saying those things explicitly, what they're saying, and I think this is happening in the United States too, is they're saying this is a nation that belongs to fill in the blank, the Swedes, the British, right? And Make America Great Again, right? That is coded language for white supremacy and Islamophobia. And so I think that what is happening is that, and that's the reference point in the United States. Like, that's the neutral stance. Like, white supremacy is the neutral stance because it is the status quo. And so you have white supremacists going to vote for Donald Trump, and they were really excited to do so. There's a horrifying article in the New Yorker that's a profile of the far right when they started catching wind of the things that he was saying. But then you also have people who just think like, yeah, America, like, shouldn't Americans get jobs? Because that's the neutral position, is the xenophobic, white supremacist, anti-gay, anti-woman position. And so I think that it's genius. I think the far right has really tapped into this, and I think that we really all need to be very much aware. I'm watching the election that's coming up in France very closely. I'm worried about what's going to happen. And that's why I think, yes, electoral politics, but yes, also, like, we need to be in the streets, and we need to be thinking about these things seriously, because they have a game plan that they've been running for a while now, and I think that it's come to fruition, and we need to know this and respond.
I mean, the GOP messaging has been very effective. It's simple. It works. It works in bringing out people that have not been part of the system for a while. One of the main reasons why Trump won and why the polls were all wrong were because loosely polling science is at the end of the day, it's somewhat based on the idea that we have some understanding of the voters in a particular region based on previous behavior. Well, if you haven't been a part of that sample of previous behavior because you weren't participating in the last decade, then you are immediately outside of that sample, outside of that polling analysis, outside of that expertise. And so, hence, that's what Trump was able to do. He was able to get a lot of those types of folks who've never been part of the system or haven't been part of the system in the 2000s or very recently to come out and actually vote. And we miss those people, and those people do feel ignored. And I would say rightly so. Many of those people live in rural, poor areas that absolutely are ignored. I used to live in rural Mississippi. The whole state's ignored. And so these people actually do have legitimate concerns. And the Democratic Party used to be the party that actually spoke to those concerns. And for some reason we haven't. Or when we had tried to, and we make a few flubs about coal workers not having their jobs coming back, which is actually the honest truth, we then get labeled as being anti-rural when we're just telling people the truth. The problem,
make it 1992
right, exactly. Now the problem is we have to do better than that, though, in order to beat the GOP message. The GOP message is very simple. Their message is to coalesce around some very core values that are really not described, but is what people feel, and so it's very effective. You feel like you are left out. Oh, great. Oh, you can sign up for that. You feel like Christians are being eroded. Oh, great. You can sign up for that. You feel like, so it's all about feeling, and it's not about anything legitimate. So this is part of the Democratic problem, and a lot of us who are educators, our problem. We're too focused on the details. Politics is often not about the details. It's really about how people feel in any given moment. It's about what their attitude is toward the political system, and that is not really about what it is, all the details of minutia of issues and interests and things that we all claim to care about. Sometimes it just comes down to feeling, and GOP has done a very good job of tapping into the hearts and minds and feelings of Americans, and the Democratic Party has to do a better job of that. And to be honest, that is where someone like Hillary Clinton does not do well. Because Hillary Clinton is by nature an amazing policy person. If you ever had a chance to meet her, she's great with policy. She's great. She's not the person you really want front and center pushing a policy, because that's not really her cup of tea. Her cup of tea is being behind the scenes in the room that is the great master that makes the policy work for millions of people. That's what she's really good at. But she's not the salesperson. And you need someone who can sell it. And Donald Trump did great with that. And that's the genius with Obama as well. He was able to tap into it. People felt good about voting for Obama.
Well, because he's a policy person, but he also, even though he doesn't love the crowds, but the second those lights go on, he's a Bill Clinton, right? I mean, he's out there and he's making everyone feel great. And I think that it took me a really long time to wrap my mind around people who voted twice for Obama and then for Trump. And it's like, well, if you think about campaigning, they're both kind of the same. It's about the feeling, right? Obama pulled these people out who had been ignored for a very long time, where it's like NAFTA and CAFTA. Those are big Democratic policies, but they took my jobs away. He says, I'm going to change that, and they took a chance. He didn't change that. He's a centrist Democrat, just like Bill Clinton. And so Trump comes along and says, I'm going to change that. I'm actually going to make sure immigrants can't come here to take your job. I can see where they voted twice for Obama. They took a chance. It didn't work out. And so now he's saying, hey, I'm going to bring coal back. Forget all this new stuff. Let's just go back to what you know. So, moving forward, what should be the takeaway before we hear from these brilliant people? What do we need to be doing? It's April. Right? There's so much of the news. I can't even keep up, and it's my job. Everything's. I'm still trying to figure out Russia. That's just me. But that's old business. Now it's like North Korea. Maybe we'll wake up tomorrow. Maybe we'll be killed her asleep. I don't know, right? Then it's like, Iran, you're behaving badly, so it's like, now we're about to start beefing with Iran. Oh, but there's Syria. So like, there's so much going on, to say nothing about Jeff Sessions and his folks, and Betsy DeVos and her folks, and Dr. Ben Carson, giving hands, stuck in the elevator, right? So like, there's just a barrage of things that I should be thinking about, worried about, screaming about, whatever it may be. So where do we go from here? If we don't get killed by North Korea in 20 minutes.
No, I don't know. We're both like, I don't know.
Right. Or I can save that to like the closer, we can take some questions first. I'm gonna do that.
Yeah.
I mean, we are a team. Listen, we are a team.
Yes,
Did we subconsciously wear blue because we're talking about the election? Or is this just like a policy?
I'll be very clear. I am blue, so I'm happy to wear it.
Right.
So, and hopefully most of you are too.
But, I mean, you know, listen, I know how I feel. If you all watch me on MSNBC, you clearly know how I feel. But that's where I try and be a little
Doesn't she
more.
look great on MSNBC? We clearly know she's smart and bright and wonderful. But every time I see you, it's like, oh my gosh. Wow.
This is the crazy lady that I planned a conference with.
Yes, right. You're married and I'm gay, so you know. What are we gonna do?
I know, another lifetime. All right, so some questions. Okay, let me just go save it back and then later.
Okay, so
Can you project?
yes. So you mentioned Bernie, and I want to go back to
Oh,
that.
yeah. Oh, good.
Because somehow I think over the course of this election, Bernie Sanders sort of became the face of the Democratic Party, even though he's does not identify as a Democrat. And so I guess my question is, how do we get people to trust the system? Like, how do we get people who are left-leaning and say, well, the Democratic Party hasn't done enough, or it isn't moving fast enough, or it isn't where I want it to be, to trust the Democratic Party? And in the same vein, how do we get people who lean to the right to trust more moderate Democrats and not, or more moderate Republicans and not, the Ted Cruzes of the world who are very far to the right? How do we get people to trust? I don't want to say the establishment because that sort of turned into a dirty word during this election, but how do we get people to trust the people who have sort of been in politics and have established policy credentials, and get people to, especially young people and people who are third party oriented, how do we get people to trust the parties and to trust the system?
I would get invested in a candidate and an issue you care about, knock on doors with them, make phone calls for them, volunteer for them, tweet for them, Facebook for them. You will find a passion in those Democratic candidates, and that they will reinforce that belief that the system works. I'm from Toledo, Ohio. One of the reasons why I have not given up on the Democratic Party and this two-party system is because I was acculturated into politics, really knocking on doors in local politics. I was that kid curious about why is recycling day on Tuesday, why certain streets get snowplowed before others, and I wanted to figure that stuff out. How did you figure that stuff out? You go downtown or wherever it is to your local Democratic Party headquarters, you sign up, you register, you join the candidates that you support. You might not support all of them, and you join them on their campaigns, and then you will find a passion for them, and because they're Democrats, you will find a passion for the Democratic Party again.
I mean, I might also say, recognizing that no candidate's perfect, right? So you'll see a candidate up close when you work for them, and you'll see how they talk to different groups with the same speech, but highlighting certain things, which might make you feel a little uncomfortable. So also recognizing that we're human beings and candidates are flawed. But I mean, this is my red wagon that I'm always pushing on you guys. But it's also really realistically think about, if you are unhappy with who's running, that you should be running. Right? This was the biggest frustration for me when Bill Bradley ran against whom in the Democratic primary for the presidency? Al Gore. Who said that? Oh. Someone under 21, I want to hear. So when Bill Bradley ran against Al Gore, right? And I was really, I had a Bill Bradley sticker in my car up until 2 years ago when I had to unfortunately retire my 94 Camry. But the reason why Bill Bradley didn't win is because whenever I would tell people I'm supporting Bill Bradley, and for those of you who take my classes, you know why I don't support Al Gore. But